Ascent Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Boundaries, Priorities, and Finding Work-Life Balance by Harvard Business Review, narrated by Alex Mortensen. Introduction. Finding Balance by Russell Glass, CEO at Headspace. Boundaries, Priorities, Balance. If you had thrown these three words out when I entered the workforce, I wouldn't have known what you were talking about. Since I was about 13 years old, I've been driven by the magic of entrepreneurialism and the ability to solve problems by building companies. And for the first 6 years of my career, I navigated the workforce and the world of startups without any thought about my boundaries, work-life balance, or overall mental health. I worked until after midnight, thought about work through fitful sleep, and woke early to do it all again. When my first startup, a promising company focused on mobile app development, started to fail as the dot-com bubble popped, I chased the false notion that working harder was the answer. After that failure, I spent the next 18 months analyzing what went wrong. I realized that much of the issue was the lack of the right workplace culture and values, as well as the unsustainable approach that I was taking to being a leader and thus modeling across the organization. I decided that my next company was going to be different. Sure, we'd work hard, but we'd be guided by the right values and cultural tenets. This approach supported a work model that was both sustainable and successful, and I felt balanced for the 6 years that we grew that company through ups and downs and ultimately hyper-growth. Flash forward to 2014, my wife and I welcomed our third child into the world. I just sold the company to LinkedIn, an incredible and life-changing accomplishment for me and my team. By all measures, I had succeeded. Yet as a new employee at a much larger company, I began to notice feelings of stress and anxiety at work. I wasn't sleeping well, and suddenly little things felt more irritating. A small comment in a meeting could trigger a physical response, a tightening in my chest, faster breathing, and tunnel vision. I'd get stuck in reactive mode, trying to solve a challenge as fast as possible, but later I'd look back and regret the decision I'd made. As I navigated and led a team within a company 20 times bigger than my startup, it seemed like my cup was empty. I needed to figure out how to get back to my best self, both at home and at work. I chose to begin a mindfulness and meditation practice, and it made a huge difference. I share this because it's important to realize that feelings and experiences like mine aren't abnormal. They are incredibly common, a perspective shared by dozens of professionals throughout this book. Research shows us that nearly 90% of employees have felt moderate to extreme stress in the past 12 months, February 2022 to February 2023. As we look to the newest generation entering the workforce, the figures are more jarring. Nearly 40% of Gen Z workers reported extreme stress, or stress every day, over that same time period. The good news is we're making progress addressing the issues. As a society, we're talking more about mental health, priorities, and balance in every aspect of our lives, including at work. In the same study, 91% of CEOs and 89% of employees agree that their company sufficiently supports their mental health, compared with 94% and 67%, respectively, the previous year. Collectively, we've reduced the stigma around severe mental illness, in addition to normalizing the conversation around self-care and mental well-being. Boundaries and burnout are now common terms both in and outside of the workplace. Companies are doubling down on education and resources around these topics, in addition to investing in self-care resources and better mental health care options for their employees. And employees have come to expect this from their organizations. We still have a long way to go, but the progress is encouraging. As described by Professors Ioana Lupu and Mayra Ruiz Castro in Chapter 1 of this book, it often takes a major life event for professionals to step back and reflect on their mental health and well-being. In my case, it was a couple of dramatic career shifts and the birth of a child. But I wish I'd been aware of the importance of boundaries, priorities, and balance much earlier on. This book provides a tremendous resource for anyone regardless of career stage. but particularly for those just starting out. The pages that follow are filled with advice from world-renowned clinicians, corporate leaders, researchers, and experts, many of whom have dedicated their careers to improving workplace culture. Their guidance ranges from easy-to-implement strategies to reflection-oriented questions to help unearth answers from within. This is a guide that you can turn back to time and time again to learn how to set better boundaries between work and life, prioritize mental and physical health, battle burnout, and tackle your to-do lists in sustainable yet productive ways. To our future generation of leaders, you have a tremendous opportunity, and in my opinion, a responsibility, not only to develop these critical skills for yourselves, but for the future teams and organizations you'll lead. With the global mental health crisis showing no signs of slowing down, we must all commit to shaping the future of work for the better. Our health and livelihood depend on it. Section 1. Finding the Balance. Chapter 1. Work-life balance is a cycle, not an achievement. By Ioana Lupu and Myra Ruiz Castro. Despite the resounding evidence that working long hours can be harmful to both employees and employers, many professionals still struggle to overcome their assumptions and their deeply ingrained habits around work hours. What does it take to free yourself from these unhealthy patterns and reach a more sustainable, rewarding work-life balance? To explore this question, we conducted almost 200 in-depth interviews with 78 professionals from the London offices of a global law firm and an accounting firm. The majority of the interviewees described their jobs as highly demanding, exhausting, and chaotic, and they seemed to take for granted that working long hours was necessary for their professional success. However, about 30% of the men and 50% of women in our sample appeared to consciously resist overwork, describing a variety of strategies they developed for maintaining a healthier work-life balance. While the details of every individual case differed, our study suggested a common mental process that consistently helped this group of professionals to change the way they worked and lived for the better. At a high level, our research shows that achieving better balance between professional and personal priorities boils down to a combination of reflexivity, or questioning assumptions to increase self-awareness, and intentional role redefinition. Importantly, our research suggests that this is not a one-time fix, but rather a cycle that we must engage in continuously as our circumstances and priorities evolve. This cycle is made up of 5 distinct steps. 1. Pause and denormalize. Take a step back and ask yourself, what is currently causing me stress, unbalance, or dissatisfaction? How are these circumstances affecting how I perform and engage with my job? How are they impacting my personal life? What am I prioritizing? What am I sacrificing? What is getting lost? Only after you take a mental pause and acknowledge these factors can you begin to tackle them. For instance, after several years of intense focus on her career, Maya, a senior associate at a law firm, described feeling like she'd hit rock bottom. It was only at this point that she was able to recognize the toll her overwork had been taking on her family and on her own mental and physical health. I was working quite long hours. It was a horrible sort of period. I think for me, that was the key point. I thought, I am not doing this anymore. This is ridiculous. So I think from then on, I have taken a real step back. Similarly, legal partner Kate told us that following the birth of her son, she experienced a major mental shift. She recognized that while the idea of, I must work, had been indoctrinated into her, she was now aware of the clash between this idea and where she was now as a mother. This life-changing event was the impetus she needed to take a step back, become aware of the mismatch between her current situation and her personal priorities, and begin to denormalize her habit of working long hours. Of course, the professionals we talked to all led very busy lives. Many of them admitted that they didn't normally have the time or the energy to stop and reflect, and even expressed gratitude for the reflection space that the interview process itself allowed them. But while it's often a major life event, such as the birth of a child or the death of a loved one, that catalyzes these realizations, it's possible to take a pause and start rethinking your priorities at any time. And although some professionals may be fine with long work hours, taking the time to think through these questions and acknowledge the trade-offs you've made, whether intentional or not, is helpful for anyone looking to discover alternative ways of working and living. 2. Pay attention to your emotions. Once you've increased your awareness of your current situation, examine how that situation makes you feel. Ask yourself, do I feel energized, fulfilled, satisfied? Or do I feel angry, resentful, sad? For example, one respondent described his realization that his current work-life balance, or lack thereof, was engendering some pretty negative emotions. You feel resentful and bitter that something that fundamentally isn't that important to the essence of life is stripping valuable time and minutes away from you. It's accentuated even more when you see someone who has lost their life or someone who has been told, "Here's how much time remains on your clock." Tobias, Audits Director. A rational understanding of the decisions and priorities driving your life is important, but equally important is emotional reflexivity. That is, the capacity to recognize how a situation is making you feel. Awareness of your emotional state is essential for determining the changes you want to make in your work and in your life. 3. Reprioritize. Increasing your cognitive and emotional awareness gives you the tools you need to put things into perspective and determine how your priorities need to be adjusted. Ask yourself, what am I willing to sacrifice and for how long? If I have been prioritizing work over family, for example, why do I feel that it is important to prioritize my life in this way? Is it really necessary? Is it really inevitable? What regrets do I already have? And what will I regret if I continue along my current path? Our priorities often shift faster than our day-to-day time allocation habits. The interviewees that described a more positive work-life balance intentionally reprioritized how they spent their time in a way that lined up with their true priorities. One participant described how he still saw himself as a professional, but had redefined that professional role to be more inclusive of other valued roles, such as that of parent. The more I really understand what's important in life, and it's not really work, it's, understanding the relative importance of work. I still get a lot of satisfaction and stuff from work, but it used to be everything to me, and now it's less than half to me. Dan, Audits Director. 4. Consider your alternatives. Before jumping into solutions, first reflect on the aspects of your work and life that could be different to better align with your priorities. Are there components of your job that you would like to see changed? How much time would you like to spend with your family or on hobbies? As one respondent illustrated, improving your situation takes time and experimentation. And it has taken me probably up to now, like my son is now 2 years old, to get to a point where it's evolved into this is how it works, working more balanced hours. And it has taken that sort of length of time, probably longer than I wanted it to, but it's there now. Michael, Audits Director. 5. Implement changes. Finally, once you've recognized your priorities and carefully considered the options that could help you improve, it's time to take action. That can mean a public change, something that explicitly shifts your colleagues' expectations, such as taking on a new role that's designed to be less time-demanding or allows for a compressed week, or a private change in which you informally change your work patterns without necessarily attempting to change your colleagues' expectations. In our research, we found that both public and private changes can be effective strategies, as long as they're implemented in a sustainable manner. For private changes, that might mean setting self-imposed boundaries, such as choosing not to work on evenings, weekends, or during holidays, and sticking to that decision or turning down demands typically associated with your role, such as new projects or travel requests, even when you feel pressure to take them on. For public changes, rather than simply telling your supervisor that you want more time off or more flexible hours, securing support from key mentors, partners, and coworkers, or even better, formally applying for a new internal position or a flexible working scheme, is likely to result in more lasting change. Importantly, the 5 steps outlined previously are not a one-time activity, but rather a cycle of continuous reevaluation and improvement. Especially if you're under the influence of an empowering culture of long work hours, it's easy to slide back into business as usual, whether that's a conscious or unconscious decision. In our interviews, we found that for people to make real changes in their lives, they must continuously remember to pause, connect with their emotions, rethink their priorities, evaluate alternatives, and implement changes throughout their personal and professional lives. The names in this article have been changed for privacy. Quick recap. Research shows that overwork isn't good for employees or their companies. Yet in practice, it can be hard to overcome unhealthy work habits and reach a more sustainable work-life balance. To achieve lasting change, view this process as a 5-step cycle. Pause and denormalize to rethink your priorities at any time. Pay attention to your emotions to determine the changes you want to make in your work and in your life. Reprioritize how you spend your time in a way that aligns with your true priorities. Consider the alternatives before jumping into solutions. Implement changes publicly and privately. This might include imposing boundaries, turning down demands, securing support from mentors, or applying for a new internal position. Read the article Why Young Professionals Should Prioritize Rest Over Work by Marcelo Russo and Ioana Lupu on hbr.org. Chapter 2. Don't Feel Guilty for Prioritizing Yourself Over Work by Donna McGeorge. When you're young and just entering the workforce, it's natural to feel anticipation, eagerness, and even anxiety. You're likely to place specific expectations on yourself about what you want to achieve and how you want to grow. It's very easy to believe that hard work and long hours are what you need to do to get noticed and succeed. But here's the thing. That's not true. Prioritizing your work over your physical, mental, and emotional self is a recipe for burnout, regardless of where you are in your career. The more you fall into the spiral of working long hours at the cost of your health, the harder it will become to recover from the long-term effects of overwork. Why do we feel guilty about prioritizing life over work? As a society, many of us still equate the hours we work to our level of productivity. More generally, we equate doing things to being productive. How often have you reprimanded yourself for wasting a weekend because you spent it resting instead of making plans? It's this false notion of busyness that makes us feel ashamed for choosing respite over action. A quick look at the history of work can explain why. During the Industrial Revolution, the average employee was expected to work close to 14 hours a day, 6 to 7 days a week. It wasn't until the early 1900s that Henry Ford, the founder of Ford Motor Company, implemented the first 40-hour work week. His decision wasn't benevolent. He believed he could sell more cars to his employees if they had more time off. The idea of hustle culture became popular in the Great Recession of 2008. The global economic crash pushed people to take on multiple jobs to survive. High unemployment rates and tough monetary conditions promoted overwork as a badge of honor that ultimately leads to success. It took a global pandemic for companies and workers to shift this mentality. Today, employers have embraced remote or hybrid models of work and are beginning to recognize engagement and motivation as the key to employee well-being. There's even been talk about flexibility and trust as the main ingredients to productivity. The point is, our definition of productivity has evolved. In the last 2 years, companies have begun to emphasize making more impact over working more hours. You can choose to stay on that path. History has shown us during hard economic times, we are pressured to shift back into a dangerous mindset, one that prioritizes work over well-being. But that doesn't need to be the case. Your worth, talent, or value as an employee can be defined by the value your output creates, not how long it takes you to create it. But to do your best work, your most impactful work, you need to build a sustainable work-life balance that prioritizes you, your health, and your happiness. How can you prioritize yourself? Despite the demands of an ever-changing world, one thing is clear. Taking care of your health, regardless of what the culture tells you, is critical to your growth and success. You don't have to prove yourself before prioritizing yourself. In fact, the opposite is true. You need to prioritize yourself to perform at your best. The earlier you start to build healthy habits, the happier and more fulfilled you will be. While this work is not easy, taking small, deliberate steps is key to building a holistic, sustainable, and empowering identity. Here are 4 things you can do to make time for yourself without hampering your professional growth. 1. Build in time to do nothing. No, really, nothing. Can you think back to a time when you just sat on the sofa, daydreaming without the TV on or your phone nearby? How did that feel? With so many things vying for our attention, it's hard to get a few moments to ourselves. But cultivating this skill will teach you how to stay in the moment without dwelling on the past or worrying about the future. Sometimes sitting with your thoughts can feel overwhelming, but there are ways to manage the hard feelings that arise. One way to build a moment of genuine disconnect is to write things down as you think or feel them. Use a journal or a diary to honestly and without much effort scribble or doodle whatever crosses your mind or shows up in your body. Think of this as a daily brain dump. It can help you literally wipe things off your mind and release the pressure to dwell, ruminate, or catastrophize. For instance, if you're worried about a client meeting tomorrow, write about it. Putting your thoughts or fears on paper can take away their power and make them easier to acknowledge and manage. Words on a page are far less ominous than dark clouds floating in your mind. Try to start or end your day with this practice. Pro tip: you can also use this practice to record things that require your attention, that need organizing, or that you want immediate access to. Client meetings, shopping lists, a big idea that randomly came to you, a business strategy, a new habit you're trying to build, or even a quote you like. 2. Learn to say no. When you're starting out in the workforce, everything feels important. A new project, a meeting, a stretch task. Each new opportunity may be your gateway to establishing your credibility, improving yourself at work. Often, this pressure makes us want to say yes more than we say no. While that feeling is normal, and a healthy flow of work will keep you motivated and engaged, you need to understand your limits. To get better at declining requests without feeling guilty, reframe saying no as setting boundaries. To set healthy boundaries, you need to determine your physical and emotional bandwidth for doing things. Ask yourself, who am I willing or not willing to give time to? What do I want or not want to do or achieve? When do I need to protect time? And when do I want to make myself available? Why would I give one person or activity my attention over another? What tasks or activities will or will not help me reach the outcomes I want? Answering these questions will help you understand what energizes you, what drains you, and ultimately, where you'd like to focus your time. Becoming aware of your own interests and disinclinations and what tasks will help you reach your goals is a part of the process. You need to acknowledge your limitations and be honest about them with yourself and others. This practice will make you a better team member, colleague, friend, and partner. It will give you the confidence to politely turn down requests. Pro tip: when a senior colleague makes a request, we assume that we have no choice but to say yes. Instead, assume that they're a reasonable person who is willing to have a conversation with you about your priorities and reach a compromise. If you need to tell someone no, just explain why. Offer an alternative and ask them if the work can be done at a later time, or if the work is urgent, clarify that you can adjust your priorities based on team and business needs. Sample language may sound like, "Thank you for thinking of me. Unfortunately, I don't have the bandwidth to take on an additional assignment this week. But if this task is an urgent one, I'm happy to discuss the timeline of my other projects and see how we can accommodate it." 3. Keep your work and life separate, literally. This is a hard one, especially if you're working in a hybrid or remote environment. The side effect of working from home has been that our spaces of sanctuary and relaxation now double as our offices, making it harder to draw clear physical boundaries between our different identities. The solution? Become intentional about how you use different spaces within your home. When we work from the same space every day, Our brain forms an association and develops specific cues that allow us to focus and become more productive. The consistency makes it easier for us to separate our work from the rest of our home. If it's a shared space, like a dining room or kitchen table, put all your work gear away at the end of the day. Turning off your laptop and packing up your work notes will allow your brain to switch off more easily. Similarly, you can carve out a space where you never work, like your bed or couch. Pro tip: once you're done with work, try to turn off alerts or notifications on your phone. Even if you like scrolling through social media, learn to mute your emails, Slack, or other work applications to help you actually disconnect. 4. Understand what work really means to you. What do you want out of your career? While this may seem like a daunting question, gaining clarity around what you want right now and in the long term is necessary to build the right habits that will help you reach that goal. The answer might not be obvious when you're just starting out, but as a first step, ask yourself a few questions. How do I want to be remembered in my work life? What legacy do I want to create? What about my job, outside of the actual work, energizes me? What work would I do if I knew there were no restrictions? Outside of work, what do I enjoy? Does my job allow me time to do those things? How would I spend my days if I didn't have to work? Through this reflection, you may gain a better understanding of your long-term career vision, as well as discover and explore passions and interests outside of your job. The more time you spend in introspection about what a career means to you, the more you'll realize that your work life is merely a part of your identity, not the entirety of it. This will help you get crystal clear about what the best use of your time is, and what stops you from wasting time on things, people, or activities that don't move you in the right direction. Pro tip: this is not a one-time exercise. Your career vision will likely change over time at different stages in your life, and that's okay. Try to reevaluate your values and goals a couple times in a year. As you grow, consider setting specific goals around what you want from a job or an employer. This could look like a healthy work culture, better work-life balance, supportive colleagues, an inspiring boss or mentor, better compensation, or more equitable pay packages. Know that there is no right time to look after yourself. The earlier you learn to prioritize your health and well-being, the better you will begin to feel about your work and your professional identity. Quick recap. When we're starting out in the work world, we often equate the hours we spend at work to our productivity, but that's simply untrue. Not taking care of yourself early on can be a recipe for burnout. Here are 4 ways to prioritize yourself in a way that doesn't hurt your career growth. Disconnect from work by doing nothing. Think of this as a daily wipe the mind or brain dump to release the pressure to dwell on thoughts or feelings. Learn to say no and define your boundaries. Become more intentional about the physical spaces at home and how you wish to use them. Understand what your career goals and vision are and how they fit into the larger context of your life. Chapter 3: Balancing a Full-Time Job with School or a Side Hustle, by Elizabeth Grace Saunders. If you were part of the pandemic-era entrepreneurial boom, you may have taken up some work outside of your regular day job. Maybe you launched a side hustle with the goal of becoming your own boss. Maybe you decided to go back to school and pursue a part-time degree. You're not alone. Small business applications jumped 53% from 2019 to 2021, and graduate degree enrollment increased by 4.3% after years of descending. Even so, the initial luster of starting a venture outside of your 9-to-5 is likely wearing off. The joyful string of congrats that sprang from your peers may be dampened by the reality of the grind, staying up late to complete assignments, the strain of balancing work, family, and friends, the to-do list that never seems to end. Adding a major commitment to your life is never easy. Without the right tools, it can leave you feeling like you have no margin of error, or worse, that you're failing in everything. As a time management coach, I guide people facing this problem, people who are looking to find balance in their lives while going above and beyond in their pursuits. Getting a degree or starting a small business, especially while you're working full-time, poses unique challenges. That doesn't mean it's not possible. Here's what I find works. Acknowledge the challenge. Whether you're putting more time into your side hustle or working on a degree part-time, it's going to be a challenge.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?